What's up guys? Today I have a very exciting video. I'm going to be talking about the new e.l.f. Halo Glow Beauty Wand. So I cannot in recent memory remember a product that got this much hype. Everybody is dying to know, are these truly Charlotte Tilbury dupes for only $9? And I think e.l.f. has really proven themselves to come out with amazing high quality dupes. So I think that's probably why these have gotten even more hype than some of the other brands that have come out with dupes such as Flower Beauty and Milani. So I'm really hoping that e.l.f. comes through for us. We're going to be doing a demo, also a wear test. I'm going to be comparing these to the Charlotte Tilbury, also to the Tarte wands and some other drugstore ones that I have in my collection, tons of comparison swatches. So why don't we go ahead and just jump right in and get started. All right, so first let's take a close-up look at the e.l.f. wands themselves. So packaging wise, these are a lot like the ones from Milani. They come in a skinnier tube with a small sponge tip applicator, and you can just kind of squeeze the tube to dispense the product. This type of packaging can honestly get a little bit messy if you squeeze it too hard. It can sometimes be a little bit difficult to control. And compared to the Charlotte Tilbury packaging, the e.l.f. is a lot smaller, so it's not going to cover quite as much area on your face as quickly. But at the same time, you can get more precise with the e.l.f. one, especially on smaller areas of your face, such as your nose, if you like to contour there. So I think depending on what you're looking for, the e.l.f. might suit your purposes a little bit more. Also, even though the Charlotte Tilbury one looks a lot larger, you're getting roughly the same amount of product in here. The Charlotte Tilbury has a little bit more at 0.4 ounces of product, and the e.l.f. is 0.33. But honestly, even if the e.l.f. was half the size, you would be paying $18 for two of the e.l.f. versus like $42 in the Charlotte Tilbury. So either way, the e.l.f. ones are a total steal. So let's go ahead and do some swatches first before I try everything on. And we'll start with the contour wand. So this is the e.l.f. contour wand in the shade Fair Light, but it does come in 5 different shades. So I just wanted to show those to you really quickly. I chose Fair Light because it has the coolest undertone and it's the most like a contour. The other ones look more warm tone like bronzers, and I have so many like that in my collection. This is why I decided to choose this one. So here's what it looks like on the skin. It's actually a very cool tone color. It's perfect for contouring and creating that grayish shadow on your face. So I think the color of this is absolutely phenomenal. So let's go ahead and do a quick comparison to all of the other contour ones that I have in my collection. I have quite a few. So looking at the swatches, the first one on the left is the e.l.f. in Fair Light, which definitely has the coolest undertone out of all of the colors that I have. Next is the Charlotte Tilbury in Fair to Medium, which is the lightest option, and it's also quite a bit warmer than the e.l.f. one. Then we have the Tarte Sculpt Tape in Soft Bronze, which is the lightest shade, and this one also is warmer, kind of similar to the Charlotte Tilbury. Then the next one is the Milani Contour in the shade 1 Soft Honey, and this one is also much warmer. Then that's followed by the 2 Flower Beauty Low Light contours. The first one is the shade Light, and I think this one probably comes the closest to the e.l.f. as far as the tone. And then the Flower Beauty Low Light in Medium, which again is much warmer, just like a bronzer. So just a couple things quickly to note about the formula. You can see that the e.l.f. one is remaining very smooth on the skin, while all the way to the right, the Flower Beauty ones are kind of starting to dry down already and starting to look a little bit patchy. Those don't give you a lot of time to work with them, so you really have to blend them quickly or they get that patchy appearance on the skin. Also, out of the more bronzy options, I really love the color and undertone of the Tarte one. If I were just to use this as a liquid bronzer versus a contour, I love that it has a more reddish undertone, and I also like the more brownish undertone of the Charlotte Tilbury because it's not overly warm. I think the Milani is just too yellow for my pink undertone, so I would say that's probably my least favorite color of the bunch, but obviously if you have a different skin tone and undertone than I do, you may feel completely differently, but I just wanted to show these all to you in a comparison so that you could really get a good idea of the differences. Next, let's check out the blushes. So these are probably the ones I'm most excited about. They come in 4 different colors. So from left to right, we have the shades Candlelit, Rosé You Slay, Berry Radiant, and Magic Hour. So these have a beautiful pearly finish. They don't have any glitter, very similar to the Charlotte Tilbury, and this is what they look like unblended. But then I also wanted to show you what they look like blended out. I think they do sheer out quite a bit. So if you have a deeper skin tone than I do, you're probably going to have to build these up a little. That being said, I'm hopeful that they will build upon themselves easily because they dry down completely to a powder finish and they don't remain sticky on the skin. So when I get into the demo, I'm definitely going to try to build these up and see what happens. So next, let's go ahead and do some quick comparisons. First, we have the e.l.f. Rosé You Slay, Charlotte Tilbury in Pillow Talk, and then the Tarte Blush Wand in Berry. I think these are all very, very similar to each other. I think the e.l.f. one might be slightly more peachy than the Charlotte Tilbury. I think the Charlotte Tilbury is a little bit more pink. The Tarte one looks like it's kind of somewhere in between. It's a little less pink than the Charlotte Tilbury, but it's less peachy than the e.l.f. And I think once these are blended out on the cheeks, though, they're probably going to look pretty much the same. Next, let's compare e.l.f.'s Candlelit with Charlotte Tilbury's Peachgasm, Tarte's Peach, and Milani's Luminoso. So again, you have a lot of similarity here, especially with the first three. I think the Charlotte Tilbury is just slightly deeper than the e.l.f. or the Tarte, and the Milani one I think is just way more shiny. That one actually looks like a highlighter, and having used it, I can definitely say it applies more like a highlighter or a blush topper than an actual blush. It doesn't have a lot of pigmentation to it, but we'll have to see how the e.l.f. one applies. Next, we have e.l.f. in the shade Magic Hour and the Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk medium shade. So these are also very similar. The Charlotte Tilbury is just slightly more of like a peachy bronze, while the e.l.f. Halo Glow is more of a true bronze, or it's like a golden bronze. I don't think you'll be able to tell the difference once they're blended out on the skin though. Again, these are very, very close. And then unfortunately, I don't have any dupes for the shade Berry Radiant. This is probably the most unique in my collection right now. I don't know if Charlotte Tilbury makes a color that's similar to this. She might, but this one was more of that deeper rose shade, and it's definitely beautiful. I will be trying this on in a few minutes, but let's go ahead and quickly look at the highlighters. So e.l.f. has released 3 different shades. We have Rose Quartz, Champagne, and Liquid Gold, and these are all absolutely beautiful. They look super smooth on the skin, and again, I think they have the perfect amount of glow without being glittery or sparkly. They have more of that pearlized effect, very similar to the Charlotte Tilbury ones. So let's do some comparisons. First, we have the e.l.f. in Champagne to the Charlotte Tilbury Spotlight highlighter. And I think both have the same, again, pearlized finish without the glitter. I think the e.l.f. one is maybe just slightly more golden, while the Charlotte Tilbury one is more of a true champagne shade. It's not quite as yellow, and I think it's a pretty subtle difference though. So let me show you what they look like actually blended out, because once you look at them this way, I really don't see much difference at all. And it's just something to keep in mind. I think a heavy swatch is always going to show you more variation, and it's a really good way to tell truly what the colors look like. But once you shear a product out, there's always going to be a little bit less of a difference. So just something to keep in mind. Next, let's check out the e.l.f. in Rose Quartz versus the Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk highlighter. So between these two, I think the e.l.f. is definitely more pink and more cool toned, while the Charlotte Tilbury is more of a peachy rose gold. I actually prefer the color of the e.l.f. for my skin tone, but again, let's just see what they look like blended out quick. So yeah, I do see a slight difference here, but not really as much as I thought there was going to be. I think they're both absolutely stunning. This one might actually be my favorite shade. I just love a pink highlighter. And then next, I don't happen to have a gold Charlotte Tilbury highlighter, so I wanted to take a look at the e.l.f. in Liquid Gold next to Milani's Lunar highlighter. I think the e.l.f. is definitely a deeper yellow gold, while the Milani one is a bit on the lighter side. I actually prefer the Milani for my skin tone, but if you have a deeper skin tone than mine, then maybe the e.l.f. might be a better fit for you. So I just wanted to share those two quickly. And I also completely forgot to swatch the e.l.f. ones next to the Flower Beauty when I was doing my swatches there. So I just quickly want to let you know what those look like side by side as well. So first up, we have the e.l.f. in Rose Quartz and the Flower Beauty in Gleam. So we have the e.l.f. on the top, the Flower Beauty on the bottom. I think the Flower Beauty one isn't quite as pink. It's just a little bit more peachy than the e.l.f. one. So I think the flower is actually pretty similar to the Charlotte Tilbury. Let me just swatch that one really quick so we can see. All right, yeah, so here's the Charlotte Tilbury one on the top, then we have the e.l.f. and then the Flower Beauty. So that's just a quick look at those. All right, and then next up we have the Flower Beauty in Opal, e.l.f. in Champagne, and then this is Charlotte Tilbury Spotlight. So again, I feel like the Flower Beauty one is a little bit closer to the Charlotte Tilbury. It's more of a true champagne shade, while the e.l.f. one is just a little bit more yellow and a little bit more golden. It's close, but not quite exactly the same. And then we have the Flower Beauty Gilded shade. So let's look at those really quick. So here we have Flower Beauty Gilded down here, which is actually kind of a deeper color, similar to the Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk Medium, which is right here. Then we have the e.l.f. in Liquid Gold, which is much more yellow gold. And then we have the Milani Lunar shade up here. So the Flower Beauty one is definitely closer to Charlotte Tilbury's Pillow Talk Medium than it is to the e.l.f. All right, so now let's go ahead and get into the demo. And I'm so excited to put these to the test against Charlotte Tilbury. So I'm going to be doing the Charlotte Tilbury on this side of my face, the e.l.f. over here, especially since that's what they're clearly trying to dupe. So I'm going to start with contour. And we already know that these colors are very different. The Charlotte Tilbury one is much more warm, but I still want to see how they apply and whether or not that's the same. And also I'm going to be doing a wear test to see if the e.l.f. ones last as long on the skin as the Charlotte Tilbury. So let's start with the Halo Glow on this side. All right, so I think I'm just gonna put a couple of dots like this. And I have the e.l.f. sculpting brush, so I'm just gonna blend it with that. All right, so this definitely shows up on my fair to light skin tone. If you have a deeper skin tone than I do, you may have to go up a shade and then it's not gonna be quite as cool toned, unfortunately. But this is very, very sheer. Like I said, it does show up on me, but I have pretty light skin. I'm just gonna put another layer really quick and just see what happens. All right, so I don't know if a second layer is really deepening it up all that much. It's still very, very subtle, but that's what it looks like. All right, and then over here we have the Charlotte Tilbury. So I'm just gonna put, again, 3 dots. This one already, I feel like it's quite a bit more pigmented. It's a little bit darker as well. And even though it's on the warmer side, like I mentioned before, it's more of like a warm brown, but it's not orangey. So I think it could actually still work pretty well for a contour. I think that's really pretty. So again, here's the Charlotte Tilbury side and then the e.l.f. I mean, looking straight on, I do definitely see the contour on both sides. So I think so far so good. Let's move on to blush. I definitely want to try all the colors of the e.l.f. so that you can see what those look like. So let's start with Candle Lit first. So this is the one that kind of looks like Peachgasm. Just gonna put a few dots there and I'm gonna blend this with my Profusion round tapered brush. All right, so this color is definitely more on the sheer side. It's almost like a blush topper, similar to the Milani one. I had to go back in and add a few more dots, blend, then add a few more dots again. So this is kind of built up 3 times. Let's quickly compare it to Charlotte Tilbury's Peachgasm. All right, so I almost feel like one coat of this kind of comes out the same as the e.l.f. It's maybe even more pigmented in just that one layer, and it's definitely more on the glowy side than the e.l.f. one for sure. Like it definitely adds a bit more of a pop. All right, so I'm just gonna remove this really quickly. I'm gonna try to leave the contour alone, and I'm just gonna add some foundation back on and we'll start again. All right, let's go to the next shade. This one is Rosé You Slay. Again, I'm just gonna start with a few dots. Okay, so this one actually showed up quite a bit better. I did have to go back in and put a few more dots, but this one actually looks like a blush versus Candlelit, which looked a little bit more like a blush topper or like a peachy highlighter. So let's go ahead and put Pinkgasm on the other side. I'm gonna put about the same amount. Okay, so this one I feel like it's pretty similar. I do have to build it up a little, just like the e.l.f. one. All right, so yeah, I think this one is definitely closer. The e.l.f. one looks really, really similar. I'm not noticing a whole lot of difference here. Both have that beautiful glow, similar amount of pigmentation, so I'm definitely happy with this color. Next, I'm gonna apply the shade Magic Hour, which is that bronzy color. Wow, I wasn't sure I was gonna love this shade because in the tube, like the bronzy shade, it's just not really my thing when it comes to blush. But this gives like the most beautiful, almost like sunburnt sort of a glow. Once it's blended out on the skin, it's so beautiful. And I'm gonna compare it to the Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk Medium, which actually, I think this one is actually a highlighter. It's not a blush, but it's almost the same color, so it's very similar. All right, so I think these two are pretty even. The e.l.f. one might just be slightly more pigmented, but that could be because the e.l.f. is technically a blush and this one's a highlighter. So I think this one's probably supposed to be a little bit more sheer, even though they're around the same color. But I really love this e.l.f. one a lot more than I thought I was going to. So very, very pretty. All right, and then we have the e.l.f. one in the shade Berry Radiant. I don't have anything to compare this to, but I did want to show you what this looks like on my cheeks. So this one is the deepest color. I really like this color too. This is kind of that, like, I just got in from the cold sort of a berry. It's beautiful. And just a quick note on application too, when I'm applying these, I'm not swiping it like this, because usually with a cream product or a liquid product, that can kind of take your foundation off. So when I'm using a brush, I'm just kind of patting back and forth like this, just stippling the product on, and that works really, really well. But I do want to try it quickly with a sponge. I know that some people do like to apply cream or liquid products with a damp sponge. And since I'm not doing a comparison on this cheek, I just want to see what it looks like blended that way. So I'm just going to put the same amount and then just take my damp sponge. And again, I'm just patting it versus swiping. Okay, so this actually gives a little bit more of a sheer result, but it looks more seamless on the skin than it does even with the brush. It looks really beautiful. It just kind of melts right in. I'm just gonna put a little bit more though and see if I can build up the color. All right, so I do still think you get more pigmentation out of it with a brush versus the sponge. So it's the exact same blush, exact same amount of product, but a very different result. So that's, again, something to keep in mind. If you're looking for more pigmentation, I would definitely apply it with a brush versus the sponge. But the sponge does give a very, very seamless result, and it's also a bit more on the sheer side. So I think it just depends on what you're looking for. All right, so I just went ahead and reapplied the contour, and I also reapplied the Pinkgasm shade and Rose All Slay on the e.l.f. side. So I just want to quickly do a highlighter. I'm not going to swatch all three just because my cheeks are starting to get a little bit irritated, but I do really want to try out the Rose Quartz from e.l.f. So I'm just going to put a few dots up here. And I don't know how much we're going to be able to tell because the blush is already glowy, and then with this on top of it, it's just going to add even more. And I'm just trying to keep it toward the top of my cheek, so hopefully we'll be able to tell the difference. Yeah, so this is very, very smooth, and again, it's not glittery at all, which is so nice. Then I'm going to put the Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk on the other side. I almost think the Charlotte Tilbury one is maybe just slightly glowier than the e.l.f. I mean, they're pretty close. They both have that same really smooth result, and they just give that beautiful glow without the sparkle. So I'm going to go ahead now about the rest of my day. I'm going to check in with you guys later and we'll see how both sides are holding up. As of right now, I think they both look pretty similar, but I'll be able to give you guys my final thoughts on all of these when I come back. So I'll see you guys then. Hey guys, I'm back. It's been about 7 hours or so. I wanted to still have some time to edit this video today, so I didn't want to go too long, but I did end up wearing these for most of the day. So, I mean, I'm pretty impressed. The e.l.f. one looks just the same as it did when I first applied it. Same as the Charlotte Tilbury on this side. I think they both look very even. I'm not noticing one necessarily more faded than the other. So I think on my dry skin, this held up really, really well, but just keep in mind that I do have drier skin, and liquid and cream formulas do tend to kind of sink in and last a bit longer than maybe on somebody who has more oily or combination. So if you do, you might have slightly different results than I did. But the fact that I'm getting the same amount of wear time out of the $9 product as I am to the $42 product, I think is really incredible. Now, a couple of things that I wasn't crazy about. The first one is the contour. So I do wish that the e.l.f. one was a little bit more pigmented. I felt like it was very, very sheer. Any skin tone that's darker than mine, this lighter shade probably is not going to show up, and you are going to have to go up to the next shade, which isn't as cool toned. And I really wish they kept all of them more cool toned, because that's typically what a contour should be. If you're getting into those warmer colors, it's basically more like a liquid bronzer than contour. So as far as the contour goes, I think the Charlotte Tilbury one does show up a little bit better, even though it is a warmer tone. But the e.l.f. one does still work for me. It's just a little bit softer and more subtle. And I do notice it more in person than I do on camera. So there's something to be said for that too. I think as far as just an everyday contour, this is something that is going to sculpt my face, but isn't going to look really obvious. So I do like it, but I just don't feel like it's going to necessarily work for everybody. Also, I felt like the candlelit shade, which was the peachy one, really didn't hold up to the Charlotte Tilbury Peachgasm. This one is a little bit more sheer, kind of like the Milani Luminoso blush. I just feel like it's more of almost like a blush topper, and I really did have to build this up a lot to get it to look the same as Peachgasm. So that was a little bit of a disappointment, but I felt like the Rosé You Slay and the Pinkgasm are pretty much exactly the same. The color looks the same on the cheeks. I also was really impressed with the Berry Radiant one, and even the Magic Hour blush, which I wasn't initially excited about, this bronze color. I thought it looked so beautiful. Also, I love the highlighters. I think they did a great job with those. They're not glittery, they're not sparkly. They really just have that beautiful pearlescent glow that the Charlotte Tilbury ones have. So overall, I think e.l.f. did a really great job on these, with the exception of the couple of things that I mentioned. I think the colors are beautiful, especially when it comes to the blushes and highlighters, and I think that they're just super long lasting. So I'd love to hear what you guys think down in the comments below. Are you planning on picking these up and trying them? Or have you found them already and tried them out? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And I want to thank you guys so much for spending time with me here today and for clicking on this video. I truly appreciate it so much. If you're new to my channel, I do focus on a lot of drugstore and affordable makeup, and also I am completely unsponsored, so you won't see any of that content here. So if that interests you, I hope you'll consider hitting the subscribe button before you go. And if you'd like to check out some more dupe content, I'll go ahead and just put a playlist right here for you to check out next if you have some time. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll see you guys in my next one. Take care. Bye.